Years ago, I read the classics. I was reading the classics, and I was reading Tarzan. And as I was reading Tarzan, I thought to myself, well, I should read some of his other works. So I looked up what else Edgar Rice Burroughs had written, and I saw that he'd written Pellucidar and John Carter. And so I read these. And as I was reading John Carter, I said, wait a minute. This guy comes from a planet with heavier gravity, so that when he goes to a planet with lower gravity, he's super strong, he's super fast, and he can make great leaps. This seems kind of obvious. Well, it turns out that Jerome Siegel, who's the creator of Superman, stated openly that Superman is loosely based on John Carter, and even a little bit on Tarzan. Well, then I started reading Doc Savage. And again, I said, what the heck? So Doc Savage is this guy. He's the pinnacle of human perfection, described as a superman. His name is Clark, and he's written by someone named Dent. Clark Dent. He's super strong. He's super smart. He's bulletproof. But he's shy and awkward around women. His father intended him to be the savior of humanity. He lives in New York City. He's always rescuing his associates. He's known as the Man of Bronze. That one by itself. Man of Steel, Man of Bronze. I mean, come on. He has a fortress of solitude in the Arctic. He calls it the Fortress of Solitude. So, once again, what the heck? Now, Siegel and Schuster stated that there were other inspirations that they used for Superman, among which is Popeye. Yes, Popeye. Popeye apparently was one of the main inspirations for Superman. Another one, apparently, was Robin Hood. Douglas Fairbanks, in the movies of the time, played Robin Hood, where he would stand with his legs apart, he'd have his hands on his hips, and he'd have his chin in the air. And so Superman, the way that Superman stands like that is based on Robin Hood. Now, these aren't the only people. Now, people tend to think of Superman as the first superhero. He's not. There was a guy in 1931 called the Golden Bat. And the Golden Bat could fly. He was invulnerable. And he wore a red cape. And before that, in 1930, there was a guy called the Gladiator. The Gladiator was super strong. He could make these incredible leaps, leap over tall buildings. And he was bulletproof. And before that, in 1902, there was a guy named Hugo Hercules who could lift cars and who could run as fast as a speeding locomotive. So Superman was not the first at all. Now, when Superman was popular, his main competition was someone we know today as Shazam. At the time, he was known as Captain Marvel. Now, Captain Marvel was way more popular. His comic books sold better. He was the first superhero in movies. Kids liked him more. He was more fun. The comic was more lighthearted and playful. Kids liked the fact that he was a kid who turned into a superhero. They could identify with him. Well, DC didn't like having competition, and so they sued him. They sued Fawcett Comics and said that Captain Marvel was derivative. DC said that somebody else was being derivative of Superman. Well, this lawsuit went on for 12 years. Fawcett went out of business, and Captain Marvel was forced into obscurity. And by the time he came back, of course, he was no longer Captain Marvel, because during the time nobody was using the name, Marvel Comics took it. So now we call him Shazam. Well, strangely, while the lawsuit was going on over all those years, Superman mysteriously acquired the ability to actually fly. Before, he could only leap over tall buildings. Now he could fly. Strangely similar to Captain Marvel. And, more obviously, he gained a nemesis who was bald. Superman's nemesis, of course, is Lex Luthor, who's this bald nemesis. Captain Marvel happened to have a bald nemesis named Dr. Sivana. So, looking at all these facts, and seeing that DC was quick to sue somebody else, the real question is, why did no one ever sue DC? And we know that years later, Marvel and DC were copying each other left and right. So why did no one sue DC back then? Well, someone did. Siegel and Schuster, the creators of Superman. They sued DC. They just wanted fair treatment. Superman was popular, making a lot of money for DC, and they're like, hey, we should be making that money. Well, this went on for years and years and years. The rest of their lives, basically. And even when they died, it still went on. Their heirs continued fighting with DC. So, this brings up the question, what about truth and justice in the American way? Well, not if you're DC. Then it's take out the competition. And screw the truth, screw justice, and apparently that's the American way. Anyway, thank you. Bye.